What's going on, everyone? My name is Carlos Serrano, and you are listening to the Blood, Sweat, and Tears podcast. This is a sports podcast where we dive deep into the life of an athlete, tackling topics on faith, the body, and the mind. In each episode, I will be having a new guest on the show where I will be interviewing them about their sports experiences, along with their personal faith journey. I hope this can be a show that can fill you up with encouragement and insight through the discussions that we will be having here. Now, with that being said, let's get on with the show. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Blood, Sweat, and Tears podcast. My name is Carlos Serrano, and I'm joined today by a good friend of mine, Abraham Hernandez, also known as Abron, or Abe the Babe as well. Introduce yourself, man.
Yo, what's up everybody? I think only Carlos knows me by Abram, but the world does know me as Abe the Babe. But yo, I'm feeling a little nervous right now, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to be here, and this is exciting to be able to support Carlos and just to share with you guys just kind of my perspective on, on skateboarding,
Yeah, so this is a special episode. I have here with me a skater. And, what I want to do with this podcast, I don't want to just have the typical mainstream sports like football, baseball, basketball, all that. Those sports are great. But I want to highlight people who are close to me who have experienced other sports, or maybe people that may think that they're not really sports. But, I want to hear their perspective of what that sport might be. But, if you don't know, this is the Blood, Sweat, and Tears podcast where we talk about sports, but this is also a Christian podcast as well, where I interview my guests and I ask them about their life, about their walk with God, and also their sports experience. So, Abe, why don't you tell us about your experience with sports, or just athletics in general? What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't say that I grew up an athlete, mainly because I was a lot of indoor kind of kid with, with strict parents. So I didn't start doing sports until actually I moved to Mexico, and the first sport that I played was soccer. And it wasn't one of those things where I was good at. I'm a person that I have to work really hard for something in order to be where I'm at. And soccer was one of those things where I just kind of was that kid who just kicked the ball, shot the ball wherever I thought, wherever I thought the ball would go. It didn't matter. As long as I had the ability to touch the ball in the game was enough for me.
Just kick it somewhere.
Yeah. So as far as my athleticism, it wasn't really developed until later on in my life.
Nice. So you played soccer when you were little. What were some other sports, or what led you to skateboarding? First off, let's go into that.
Well, honestly, for some reason when I was a child, I always liked the skater look. I liked the big DC shoes with the pants, over the shoes. And I thought that stuff was great. I never knew about skateboarding or even heard about an ollie until one time I saw some guy skating down a hill, and he ollied off a curb, and I was like, yeah, it's up to this day. That image is still very vivid in my head.
Oh wow!
And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I always I always think about that, and I share about that because I think that was one of the things that was like kind of instilled in my brain, that ollie what that guy did, and I was like, whoa! Every time I had the chance to get a skateboard from somebody, or just some kid or a friend had a skateboard, that's all I wanted to do, for the time being. But I never had a skateboard also because my brother broke his nose skateboarding. We found a skateboard on the street, and he fell off the skateboard and he broke his nose, and he was bleeding like a lot, and they got rid of that skateboard, and it was just dangerous, I guess, for us to have a skateboard. So my brother, you know, just imagine him, you know, just.
So he kind of ruined it for you at first.
Yeah.
So when was it when you first had like your official first skateboard?
So it's funny because like the first time I had a skateboard, I asked a friend if he can lend me a skateboard because I wanted to use it as transportation from my house to school.
Right.
And that's when I moved here, when I moved to San Diego, when I moved to Chula Vista. And I never gave him his skateboard back. Like, and he would ask me, and I would always make up excuses like, you know what, dude, like, don't trip. Like, I got you next week, or I'll bring you the money for the skateboard, you know. $20, right? Oh yeah, $20. Okay, don't worry, dude. Next, I got you. And I wore that skateboard down so much. I razor tailed it. You know, everything, and I gave it back to him, and it was like 2 years after he let me use it.
And by that time, it's just like all trash.
He was like, dude, like, he still wanted it back, you know. I guess his, you know,
it meant something, I guess.
Yeah. But that was it wasn't my first official skateboard because technically it wasn't mine, but I remember it was an Element skateboard, and that's actually one of the brands that I go towards more because of it being my first skateboard that wasn't mine.
Gotcha. So you more go to it for like nostalgia.
Yeah. Okay. Whenever I have an Element skateboard, it brings me back. Or anything Element brings me back to when I first started skateboarding, because for some reason that was a brand that was more available to me than anything, or because I don't really know much about skateboarding either.
Right.
You know.
So this was when you kind of started getting into it. What was it for you when you started getting like really into it? When it finally clicked for you, like this is.
Yeah. So my goal was actually to just learn how to ollie. I told myself, if I can learn how to ollie as I'm skating up, like I just ollie up a curb, that would be legit. I would be happy. And then I learned how to do that, right? I remember I learned how to ollie up the curb, and I was with a bunch of my friends, and they all were kind of starting at the same time as I was, and I remember ollieing up a curb in the Chula Vista Library. That was my first curb I've ever ollied up, you know, and it was probably like half a curb, you know, it wasn't really a full curb.
Right.
And I realized, dude, this is awesome. Like, if I can ollie up a curb, this means something else, you know. And I remember ollieing my first 3-stair, and that was like that was so scary, you know. I had no idea that I was gonna ever be capable of throwing my body off 3 steps. Just 3, as simple as it sounds. It still was a mental challenge in the process as well, you know.
Right.
But it definitely it definitely took a different route as soon as I learned how to how to do the ollie, which is the principle of skateboarding.
Right.
You know, unless you're one of those freestylers that, you know, they don't really do a lot of tricks that involve popping, but a lot more freestyle, like you know, like the videos that you see of people with the small boards.
I know enough.
Yeah, they don't really, you know. Anyway, but it definitely took a different route once I learned how to do my ollie. So.
Gotcha. Wow. So we'll talk more about that in the next segment. But it's funny how you said like that was something that it may seem like simple. I can't even get on a skateboard without feeling like I'm gonna like break my head open.
Yeah, you know, it's funny how like people are like, "Yo, how do you do those things?" Like I only know how to ride, or you know, I barely can even go off a curb. But honestly, dude, like skateboarding, it doesn't really matter like how good you are, because you can be really good and not enjoy yourself at all. And I've come across a lot of skateboarders who they're killing it, but they're very angry, and there's a lot of rage in the way they skate, and it's like, and it brings off like kind of like intimidation or some kind of like weird vibe, you know. But I've seen kids who,
I never knew that.
Yeah, some kids who are not as good per se, but they are having the time of my life, and having the time of their life, and at the time when I was learning how to skate, that's what it was for me. I would just have the time of my life, even if I fell, even if I bruised my shins or my knees or whatever. Just the process of learning how to fall and learning how to like make it easier for myself. It was very intriguing for me to make those things click in my head, you know, and with my body.
Yeah, and it's crazy. That's interesting how you were just saying that. I never knew that about skating. How you can like skate angry, but yet like, they're killing it and they're like doing good at it. But I guess that makes sense, even just with a lot of stuff with our life in general. And again, we'll touch more on that in general. But I want to ask you about you also. We talked about your skating history and your history with sports. What's your history with Christianity and your personal walk with God? Tell us about what's that like. What was that journey like for you? How it started and where you're at right now?
Yeah, so my walk with God has really been one of those kind of on and off things. I was introduced to the whole Christianity lifestyle, what it looks like to be in a Christian household, what it is to go to church and live with other Christians at a very early age. Actually, I'd say my first memories are with the church, with the Church of Christ. My dad was reached out to at the age of when I was 2, and he I don't remember how old he was, but I was 2 at the time. And I remember we moving into a household, and we lived with a lot of other disciples, and I remember a prayer was something big in my life. I would pray a lot as a kid. I would see my dad pray. I would see the household pray. There was always Bible talks at our house, and it was legit for me, you know, being a kid. And I remember the love and the love and the care that I got from people in the church, which was ultimately one of the things that I've held on to still to this day, that has helped me continue in my path. And the reason why I said it was one of those things where it's on and off, because as a kingdom kid, it's really hard for me to understand and even accept God's love towards me, because of me deliberately choosing to go against not necessarily directly go against God, but we do go against God when we sin, but choosing other things, and other things for me were substance abuse, you know. Still to this day, I struggle with that, you know. Like I mentioned you earlier, I am actually sober 26 days. It's been 20.
Awesome.
Yes, like and believe it or not, that's a long time for me, you know. And what I'm trying to learn is how to want the things that I need. You know, like how do I want to fear God? How do I want to actually like spend time with God more than anything else, you know?
Yeah.
How do I want to be pure, you know? And so it's like, I know I need those things, but like I should want those things.
Yeah.
Like as much as I want to go skateboard, and I choose to go skateboard over things.
Yeah.
Over priorities.
Yeah.
You know, like, dude, I think I've stopped working at jobs just because I wanted to skate more. I am serious. Like, you know, it's like, it's a whole different world now for me, you know? Like, I literally can't picture what it would be like for me if I didn't skate. I'd probably be a little bit like bulkier, maybe, or have a lot more weight on me, because skateboarding is a lot of cardio, you know.
Yeah.
And it works primarily my core muscles, and not really my my chest or my biceps or
Right.
anything. But that's why, I try to go to the gym whenever I can. But yeah.
Nice. No, thank you for sharing that, dude, and even just being 100% real with that. And I mean, 26 days, that's huge. That's a victory, and it's a big reason why I wanted to get you on this podcast. To honestly, just the real aspect of just how this walk with this relationship with God can be very difficult and challenges for different reasons for various different people.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you fighting. Honestly, like Mike aside, like this is just between you and me. Like I really appreciate that about you.
For sure.
All right, guys, welcome back. Now we're going to be talking about kind of the sports news that's going on throughout sports world. And speaking of the sports world, there's a big event going on right now, and it's called the World Cup. And I'm going to be honest in front. I'm not too familiar with soccer. I know it's a big deal when the World Cup comes, so I definitely try to pay attention as much as possible. I know enough, but I'm not going to pretend like I know a lot about it. But today there's a big game, even though the U.S. isn't in right now, but Mexico was playing, and since we live, Abraham and I live like pretty much near the border in San Diego, it's a big deal here. But Mexico, they lost pretty badly against Sweden, and it was rough, but a big but. South Korea did win against Germany, which was a huge upset, and the defending champs didn't make it. But speaking of soccer, though, Abe, I wanted to ask you this. Well, I'm not too familiar with soccer. I know soccer is somewhat bigger in your family. I want to get your perspective. What is it about soccer, and it's more specifically the Mexican culture, that why it's such a big deal in that?
Yeah, I think for starters, like coming from where my dad came from, he lived in a ranch, so literally like corrales or not barns, but where they would have chickens and I don't know what
Coop? Like a
yeah
chicken coop?
yeah, and so that's the environment my dad grew in. It wasn't like my dad was really rich. They actually were really poor, and I think it's humbling when there's something that can bring joy, and for a lot of people that's sports. Sports is something that we can really forget about anything that's going on, forget about any of the worries, and I think it's really big because that was one of the gateways to kind of forget about those poverty, forget about hunger, forget about the families, the problems going on in the family, and it gave a sense of hope and passion. So I think that would, the way I see it is it's big in Mexico because it's a source of happiness, and when and that's why people like do it with passion because it involves like the way you feel and the way you're able to be the ultimate yourself, with your skills and your abilities, so that for me, like I know I wasn't like super good at soccer, but I wasn't bad either, and when I learned that with putting in work and having enough passion, like I'm able to develop skills that I'd never had, and skills that are gonna help me outside of playing soccer, outside of sports, outside of skateboarding.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. That sounds like honestly just like a big sports thing in general,
Mm-hmm.
or even just any hobby. It's a lot of it is escaping and kind of just escape from the world, escape from all the craziness that may
Mm-hmm.
be going on, and this is just a time where it's just like you and the obstacle in front of you, or whether it's you or the opponent in front of you. Like,
Yeah.
I know sometimes with life you can't really see the opponent in front of
Mm-hmm.
you, but at least with sports it's like, okay, I know I can see him, not my enemy but more my opponent.
Mm-hmm.
I could go against you, and so that totally makes sense. And it's, I mean, soccer is a big deal, or how they say it, football or football. It's a huge deal in the world. The fact that they even do a World Cup. I know they don't do a world football thingy,
Yeah.
or like American football or world basketball thing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I respect the game a lot. I respect the athletes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't play it. I've tried playing soccer. I almost said football, but actually, I did play American football. But when I play soccer, I would just like kick people's shins. I was
Yeah.
kind of had that aggressive mentality.
You know, it's funny. Like, something I've come to realize is the older you get, the more you need to stretch your body. And,
Oh yeah,
and be more in shape.
yeah.
Because I'm actually injured right now from my groin,
Mm-hmm.
and it's funny. I injured myself playing soccer, and not from skateboarding. But I the church has a soccer tournament every
Yeah.
year where we get together with the West Coast regions, and I pulled my groin, from playing a few soccer games, and it sucked because it kind of brought me down a few levels to where I was from skateboarding, so the doctor was like, you shouldn't be even walking the next 4 weeks, but I gave it a week. I gave it a week,
It's a typical athlete response.
I gave it a week, and I had a lot of ibuprofen to back me up. So
Well, there you go. There's that. Well, you mentioned skateboarding. For this episode, we're not gonna have the inspirational athlete of the episode, but instead, kind of a new segment called "Explain Your Sport" that I wanted to do. And I was talking to Abraham the other day about doing this podcast. And one of the things that started the conversation of why I wanted to do this is I asked him a simple question: was, do you consider skateboarding a sport? Me asking him that, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking he's gonna say yes, but he gave me a different answer, and I wanted to get his thoughts on this more this time with the mic in front. But me not being a skater, I would consider it a sport, which is the reason why I'm putting you on this podcast. But you have a different answer, and I want you to explain to the people listening what your thinking and meaning behind that is.
yeah, and like I said that day you asked me, I do not think skateboarding is a sport. The reason being is there really are literally no rules that I need to follow so that I can skate. I can literally take my skateboarding outside of the skate park. I can take my skateboarding inside my house. I can take my skateboarding stationary. I can take my skateboarding to a curb, to some stairs, to a rail, to a bank, to anything that is slidable or grindable or whatever, I think that ever since I've learned and discovered new ways of skateboarding, with friends, by myself, with new people, with strangers, life is just become, like I mentioned earlier, it's become different. I no longer just see stairs as just regular stairs to walk up and walk down. Every time I see a stair set that I know I can potentially jump down, that's what I see, potential. I see an ollie, I see a back 180, I see a front 180, I see a nollie, a heel flip, a kick flip. That's what my mind straight goes to um, without me having to force that in a way. You know, it's awesome that I'm also even able to dream about skateboarding. You know, which is something that I always look forward to, and that's the thing. It's why I say it's more of a lifestyle more than a sport or even a hobby because, um, you know, there's no really set time that I need to do this skateboard. Like I don't have a schedule where um, I have to meet up with a certain group of people, and I'm only skating with that certain group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can take my skateboarding, like when I worked at rallies. You know, I worked at rallies, and it sucked because I would get out at 9 o'clock, and I was worried that I was stressed that I wouldn't be able to skate after work or before work because of my schedule, and I would literally get out of work and I would skate home and I would warm up as my skate home, and I would go outside, and I would skate at the parking at the CVS, and it's because of those times that I still pushed myself to skate, even if I was tired from a long day of work and I was standing up for 8 hours straight. That I've been able to um, really what's the word like reinforce my tricks.
Mm-hmm.
It's for those late nights, for those early mornings, for those days where I just rather like wanted to rest instead of skate, but I still went out to skate is why I can nose manual. You know, I remember one night that's the only thing like for a month straight. That's the only thing I practiced. I practiced how to nose manual until it's I could do it anywhere I go. You know, I can do a nose manual on a bench, on steps, on curbs. Like it's on mani pads. It's like because of those moments is that I was able to realize that this is something that I can think about anywhere I go, and I can do anywhere I go as long as my foot's not swollen,
Right.
or I have my skateboard with me. So I think of it more of a lifestyle. I think of it like I've already hurt myself too much. I've already shed too much blood. I've already I don't think I want to say I've broken enough bones because I don't want to break any more bones.
Right.
But I have broken my finger before, and I don't I've worked too hard for to be where I'm at, to kind of let what other people say or let what society says about skateboarding to kind of stop me. You
Right.
know, like yes, it's not always good for my body because I do sometimes, unfortunately, I wake up in pain every day. My foot, I have an injury in my foot that hasn't gone away. My groin hurts every morning, and it's like wow, like my knees crack a lot. My ankles are always like cracking, but it's like I will live with this. I will continue to live the lifestyle that God has allowed me to really enjoy myself, and I think it's awesome how God gave us as humans the ability to um, recover.
Yeah, which we'll get into as far as the topic of the episode. And I appreciate your explanation. What would you say as far as, because with sports, there's usually like an end goal when you like compete for something. There's an end goal for something. For skating, what would be the end goal, or is there an end goal for skating?
Well, I mentioned earlier that my goal was just to learn how to ollie.
Right.
But it once you learn how to ollie, you can learn how to kickflip. Once you learn how to kickflip, you can do backside flip. Once you can do those very different variations of tricks, you can throw it down something. You can go up something. So it's like The goal obviously of is to learn something you've never done in a day.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's not the case because there's days where it's hard to skate. There's some days where it's
Right.
just really hard, and I need to just stick with the basics.
Mm-hmm.
And as I do the basics, I feel warmed up. I feel like, okay, I already got the basics down, so I'll try to work my way up to something that is a lot more difficult. Like for me, I would say because there's I would say there's two, maybe three different ways of skating, because there's street skating
Mm-hmm.
and there's vertical skating, but there's also stairs.
Yeah, I remember you mentioned something like
Yeah,
that.
but I think stairs would be considered street. But for me, the hardest would be vert. Like transition, the bowls and the extensions and the drop-ins and all those things, half pipes, quarter pipes. Like that's not how I started skating. I just started skating on the street, like,
Mm-hmm.
and then I wasn't introduced to to skate parks like a little bit later than that.
And those are the verts.
Yeah,
You're saying like
and I kind of lost where my train of thought was going with that, but um, definitely going to different skate parks has taught me that there's infinite ways of doing something, and I skate a totally different way than the guy next to me, and there's nothing he can say that that I'm doing something wrong. He can't say I'm skating wrong, and I can't tell him that what he's doing is wrong.
right.
Because he's his character, I'm his character. He has his board. He understands his board his way, and I understand my board my way.
Gotcha.
And obviously when there are people who kind of throw themselves down something without knowing what they're doing, but it's all kind of trial and error. You're gonna hurt yourself either way. I'm gonna hurt myself either way, no matter what. But it's always important to remember um, like that goal, like that goal that you want to learn something that day, and motivate yourself, to continue.
Right. Gotcha. And so you mentioned a different type of skating, and this might sound like an ignorant question, and I'm sorry if it does sound like one, but what are your thoughts as far as like this pro skating, like X Games? I know there's I think I saw an ESPN thing with you one time where there was a street skating thing on ESPN, but then there's also like there's the bowls that you're talking about, like that. What are your thoughts on that type of skating? Is that something you ever thought about, or is that something that you admire from afar or respect? Like, what are your thoughts on that type of? Because I mean, it's on ESPN, and that would be considered a sport. Well, I want to understand what your thoughts on that.
So, to be honest, like something that I struggle with a lot is insecurity. I'm very insecure about myself, about the way I look, about the way I skate sometimes. And personally, I've kind of put myself in the mindset where if I feel insecure looking at other people who are way better than me skate, because I feel like I will never be able to be that good or be as good as they are. So I kind of discourage myself sometimes in that way, which is something I'm trying to work on, which I'm working on. But to me, those things are they're surreal. Like what people can do with as far as pro skating, what they can do with their skateboards. Like the full on commitment, the full on like physical training to elevate themselves really high in the air and come back down with incredible balance. I find it I don't really enjoy those kinds of like ESPN or street leagues because that's just not what I am exposed to on a daily.
Gotcha.
You know, I'm more exposed to people who are just regular Joes
Right.
who are
More grounded.
yeah, more grounded, but still at the same time incredible skaters. I know like when I started skateboarding, I started skating with people who were already sponsored and people who already had been skating for 10 years already.
Wow.
So that I'm really grateful for that, because I'm thankful for those people, because they taught me a lot. They taught me how to, have guts and how to go for it, just
Right.
go for it, because um you know because I was able to do it. It's just, my mindset is kind of negative a lot,
Right.
but um like I said, definitely grateful for those people who have um directed me to feel like I'm able to do this. I'm able to get better, and for their friendship. I always say that if there weren't homies, I probably wouldn't be skating, because we have always given each other skateboard parts that we needed, or lended each other skateboards, or even shoes to skate.
Right.
So yeah.
So it's like a real community type of thing with that.
Definitely.
That's cool. Alright, guys, welcome back. And right now we're going to be talking about the topic of the episode. And that topic for the episode today is recovery, which, goes into a lot of what we were talking about with skateboarding, but we're also going to be talking about things that recovery does for our life as well. So, first, Abraham, skateboarding, I'm assuming it requires a lot of recovering.
Mm-hmm.
It requires a lot of getting back up and healing with a lot of the falling. But for you and your experience with skateboarding, why is recovery such an important aspect of skateboarding and being successful in that?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that we will get hurt. And sports and everything in general, we are gonna get hurt regardless. When there's something that is bigger, and we're trying to attain something that's much bigger. Like for example, I was trying a trick down. I was trying a nollie backside 180 down a 7-stair, right? And I literally I didn't land it, and literally I rolled my toes to the point where my toes pretty much made a fist, right? So I'm glad I didn't break anything. I'm glad my
So you had hand feet.
Yeah, it was bad. Okay, and my foot is still bad to this day. And it is important. Like recovery is essential to all this. Because if we don't take that time off to let ourselves heal, or even to try something different, it kind of will get worse,
Right.
I think that something that I really appreciate in the way that God created us is that he gave us he's given us free will, and with our free will we choose to get back up, and we choose to try it over and over again. I remember one of my biggest battles was a heel flip down a 3-block, and I had to at least try it at least like 25 times before I landed that heel flip, right? And it started off, I first ollied down it, and it was a pretty big ollie. And I was actually surprised that I was able to get that ollie in the first few tries. And I thought of the heel flip, and I was like, you know what, like I had just heel flipped down some stairs, and I was getting it down some stairs, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna try to get this heel flip, and 25 tries later, I landed it, and I only know it was 25 tries because when I counted my phone to see how many times they recorded, it was 25 times. But it sucked because literally like after that, like one of my right butt cheek was flat. It was literally flat. I could not flex my butt
Oh,
because of the way I would slide on my butt. I would fall on my butt, and
the amount of times you kept falling.
yeah, and literally like my butt was like saggy, and then and the other butt cheek was all firm and strong, and my right one was like flat, like a flapjack. Like you could put some syrup on it and call it a flapjack if you'd like, but it sucked, dude. Like I could not flex my butt. But I'm like I was mentioning the aspect of getting back up.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that skateboarding has taught me, and in my walk, because I said earlier that it was kind of one of those things where it was on and off.
Yeah.
Like I've walked away, and I hate saying that, but I walked away from God, but I've still had the courage to come back.
Yeah.
And God has instilled that in me to come back and to make that decision to change, even if I fell again and I came back and I fell again, and I'm on that process right now of getting restored, in front of the church, and and really digging deep to see who I really am.
Yeah.
Things that I've never been exposed to, and things that as God has blessed me with people who know how to do those things.
Yeah.
Touching on those subjects already kind of like hurt,
Yeah.
But I need to learn how to think selflessly, like, and how I can really be used to do God's will.
Yeah.
Regardless of where I'll end up, even, and I hate to say this, but even if it costs me skateboarding, like I will give that up for God, but at the moment, God is blessing me with that, and I'm still healthy, and it seems like there are people that I feel like I really need to reach out to.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that God has allowed me to live up to this life, what I have lived with skateboarding. It's been amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I appreciate you sharing all that. I know just the whole aspect of recovery, of especially the biggest part is like getting back up when falling.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's huge for just sports in general. Like just speaking sports wise, like that's huge. And then just taking that into our life, it's a whole nother ball game. It's like for athletes, it can be so easy for us to like, all right, I may be hurt, but I'm gonna still play. I'm gonna still do what I want to do because I love this thing. When life hits us, it's a whole nother thing, and I think it's something that we can learn from, as far as the aspect of the sports, or even the things like for you in skateboarding. I think it's a perfect tool to learn because you're always falling. You're always even having to try something new, like you mentioned, like, okay, that's not working, so let's try this. I know for me, that's something where I'm currently doing. I'll be honest, I'm not in the greatest of spots in my walk, but I feel like it's something that I'm still pushing. It's still something that I am fighting, and even just getting back up. It's not a quitting type of thing. I mentioned in my very first podcast episode, it's just something that my dad and my family instilled in me, that whatever you start, you're gonna finish. And that was a big thing for football. Even though when I first started football, I wasn't in the best of shape. I hated the conditioning. I was last in a lot of those things, and I wanted to quit, but my dad was like, "No, you're gonna finish. You're gonna finish what you started." And I'm so grateful that he instilled that in me, because now it's a sport that I love, um, and it's instilled that in me as far as for my own walk with God, to where no matter how many times I fall, that I'm not gonna quit. I'm not gonna give up on this thing. I'm gonna finish what I started, and in this case, finishing till whenever God calls me, and whenever my time is done here, and even until then, eternity with Him. But yeah, just the whole aspect of recovery is so important. Um, Speaking of that, though, we're talking about the aspect of God. What is it? How do you think God is able to help us recover through things in life, like in general, where we're taking that? Because we could learn so much from sports. So how can God help us in our lives? What do you think He does, or even for you personally, what has He done for you to help you recover in certain ways in your life?
You know, I there's so God is good,
Yes,
right?
all the time.
Yes, and all the time.
God is good.
Yes, exactly. Like, bottom line, like, everything that is from God, God's will, God's word, the fact that He sent Jesus is good.
Yeah.
So He promises us hope and a future,
Mm-hmm.
as long as we seek Him with all of our heart, right? So the fact that God is already, like, He's already faithful to His word and what He says and what He promises us, like, I think, what was your question again? Say the question.
Just a question, like, as far as what do you think God does in your life to
Oh,
help you to recover?
Yeah. So God is like the scripture in Acts 17 that says that, like, we're gonna meet people that we need to meet in order for us to be
Oh yeah,
to
that
be
God will place people in the proper place and proper time.
Yeah. So that's so, like, strategic and so, like, creative of God to do that, because at the moment I'm being held by my good friend Jose Garcia.
Mm-hmm.
And if he didn't go through the things that he went through, um, I don't want to say that it's because of Jose Garcia that I am I am where I'm at today,
Mm-hmm.
because God is the one who purposely arranged our friendship and arranged the times that we are getting together.
Yeah.
Which we just talked before. He called me on the phone before this, and he's, mind you, he's 36 years older than me, but I consider him not only a brother, but also like a father figure.
Yeah.
And he, and God has been able to use him to relate with me on our substance abuse and our as addicts, to be able to expose what's in my heart, to expose the yuck and the goo that I have never even shined a light on before, and so I think that God is faithful, and he promises me, and that's just makes me feel like I can't keep, like, trampling on that,
Yeah.
like, I was reading Hebrews 10, and it talks about, like, if you keep on sinning, there is no more sacrifice left, but a fear of rage, and I need to learn. I want to fear God the way He's calling me to, so that I can make these changes in my life, and I really have a very vague and very inaccurate mentality of God, and I've noticed that, because why can anybody say that God doesn't love them? Why can anybody say that God's not there when Psalm says that, God created to rejoice in our day because it's a new day that God created. So
Yeah.
another day that we get is another day that God is in it. And that's something that I was brought up yesterday in my celebrating recovery class,
Mm-hmm.
in my NA meeting that I attend.
Yeah.
They brought that scripture up, and it was like, that is so true. Like, God created this day that I'm living right now, and how can I not say, how can I say that He doesn't care, or He doesn't listen to me, or He's not like who He says He is, or not educate myself enough to know these things.
Yeah.
You know.
No, absolutely, and that's so absolutely true. And I love what you were talking about with Jose helping you, and I think that's one of the things we mentioned. This I was talking to you about this off the mic at a different day, about like how God created us in His image, and how I know for me, when how God has helped me to recover in certain areas in my life, and even I would say right now, recovering through a lot of transition and a lot of change, is the people that He put in my life. Um, whenever there's moments for me where I feel like I might not be connected to God, or I feel like I'm distant from Him, when I'm with people who are followers of Christ, when people who are devoted to God, when they're in more of a sober mindset, they help me to be able to see God's love through their love, and it's been helpful for me. I know for you even say with Jose, like I feel like you getting with him is God using him to show you His love. Um, that's been huge for me, and even as you were talking, the scripture I was looking for, you've shared this with me before. It's James 5, um, verse 16, where it says, "Therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective." I mean, and the scripture I feel like fits so well to the whole aspect of the topic
Yes.
of recovery.
Yes.
Like, I mean, clearly it says if you want to be healed, confess your sin. I don't think it's just confessing your sin. I think it's also just confessing whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, get open with your life. And I know for me, through, gosh, honestly, since the beginning of this year, that has been a big motivator for me, to where I want to be healed. And if I want to be healed, I need to get with people. I need to be transparent.
Yeah.
And I need to just pour my heart out. And when I do that, man, it just helps me out so much. And I know it could help so many other people as well. And that's what I'm hoping that this whole podcast can do for other people, is that they can hear this, and they can hopefully be encouraged to just one day just be open, to just be transparent, and just to be healed in a way. And I also mentioned the whole idea of how we're all created in God's image, and that can go in many different directions. And unfortunately, when people do terrible things or sin, it skews God's image. And so it's all about being with the right people. And even when you're trying to recover from an injury, you want to go to the right doctor or the right specialist. So there's all these different types of things. And, I'm just really grateful that God is a great God, a God that's that loves us, that wants a relationship with us, and is willing to heal us through His people. And I think that even shows that He's such a relational God. Otherwise, if He just healed us just with just His finger touching us, that's
some kind of wand or something.
Yeah, it's not. If I wouldn't see that as a God who is a relational God. If anything, He's working through people. That brings more confidence in me in doing that.
Yeah, and a good point that a friend once brought up was that regardless of we know it or not, like, people in society, they still try to confess their sins without them knowing. Like even if it's not for the right motive, like when guys talk, they always talk about things that they did.
Yeah.
You know, they bring up things that
more like out of pride.
More out of pride, but still things that we really can't keep inside ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, like for example, like one of the reasons why they figure out, let's say, somebody who's gonna do a shooting is because they make a comment or they say something before, or they let somebody know prior what they're gonna do, right? So it's like the same in music. Rappers are always saying the things that they do, and they almost confess their sins by telling us the drugs they're doing, the how much women they're with, how many times they've robbed, and the robberies and the you know, whatever, you know, and it's something that God has kind of he made us that way so that we need to confess our sins.
To cry for help.
So it's like that scripture that you brought was you know, was good, because like I know that if I don't confess my sin, even on a daily basis, like I will become I become a different person, more angry. I tend more to give into impurity, to immorality, you know, and things like that, and it's really important for us to be healed and to recover, to open up our sin.
Yeah.
You know, Satan's base of operation is things that we keep in secret.
Yeah. Yeah, that stuff will eat you up alive, on the inside as well. Mostly in the inside, but dude, I know we could be talking about this for forever. But we're gonna end it here. Thank you guys so much for listening. For these guys listening, please share this. Please subscribe to the iTunes, and we're on Google Play now. So for Android phones, you can listen there. But thank you guys so much again for listening to this episode of the Blood, Sweat, and Tears podcast, and we're signing off. And thank you, and God bless.
Sweet, skate or die.